Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Silicon Saga, Wreck of the Andromeda. Silicon Saga is brought to you by Rusted Gear Games. It's for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and games range anywhere from 60 to 120 minutes. Silicon Saga, Wreck of the Andromeda is a sci-fi dungeon crawl exploration game set aboard the floating wreck of a space research station. You will take on the roles of members of a crew of space marauders looking to strip the station of valuable resources. Unfortunately, the station is not quite as abandoned as you had hoped. You will be faced with lurking dangers and struggling survivors. The goal of the game is to collect a determined amount of silicon from the ship and return to the hangar with the silicon before the game ends. There are variable player modes, which allow players to compete against each other or to play cooperatively. So, the game is played on square tiles, with players drawing and placing tiles as they explore the ship. Players move and interact by playing cards. The game is broken into rounds, with each player drawing a number of cards and performing a number of actions during that round. Players take turns performing those actions one at a time. They have a chance to add new cards to their deck or hands each round or to gain additional actions. While exploring the Andromeda, players will find resources such as crafting components, ammo, food, and their true goal, silicon. They may also find survivors, dangerous threats, or face random events. In addition to interacting with entities encountered on board, players can interact with one another. They can steal from or sabotage other players to take or force them to drop any carried silicon. So, your end goal here is to survive, find that silicon, and escape before it's too late. So, like I said, there's 3 modes to this game. You can play competitive, you can play cooperative, or you can play solo. And there's specific rules to each of those. But in the end, each player is going to get their own character, their character board, some starting cards, and your bag of tokens. The bag is interesting because you're going to be using them on your character sheet, as well as you'll be diving to the bag to pull cubes at certain times, which is pretty fun. Now, there is a crew level tracker which tracks your current level of your particular character, as well as this is where you'll be placing the silicon as you grab it. Now, based on that game mode that you've chosen will determine how much silicon you actually need to find. Now, as you'd expect, there's a boss level enemy threat in the game, and in this prototype version, we have 2 different ones. We have the Siren and the Peacekeepers, but there are very different rules around each of these and how they behave within the ship. You have a set of cards that go with each of them, and these cards and things we'll be interacting with at certain moments during the game. Now, there's a threat level on each of those that will be moving up and activating as those different bosses come into play. And of course, you have a series of cards that you're going to be tapping into. As you move through the Andromeda and do searches, you'll have that deck of cards you'll be tapping into, and as you narrow down into more important things, even the back of the card will give you a hint if this is going to be something good or potentially vague or nothing at all. So you'll find gear, you'll find silicon, all kinds of different things in this search. Then you've got survivors that you're going to be encountering, you've got gear you're going to be finding, as well as crafting. If you go to a fabricator and you've collected the right type of necessary resources, then you can fabricate all kinds of different things, which is really cool. And of course, you've got things like ammo and food tokens to aid you on your way. And the most important token of all, silicon. And of course, you have all your tiles that you'll be drawing as you explore the Andromeda. Now, you also have a tile effect or reference sheet to help you when you encounter the different tiles. And some of the tiles will allow you to put tokens on them where you can search and do things like that. But there are doorways as well, and there's vents that you can travel through. The doorways will have a green light if it's unlocked, it'll be a red light if it's locked. So there's tokens that you place down when you come to a locked door. And as you move through each round of the game and you get experience for what you did in that round, you have the opportunity to not only level up your character, but also spend that experience to get additional skills and add them to your deck, ever expanding your character throughout the game. Now, as you move through the ship and explore, you may run into events that you'll have to deal with, as well as you will have a personal objective to try to fulfill secretly from the other players. So each round of the game has 3 main phases, and as you'd expect, you're going to have a series of cards and actions you can perform, and that's all based on what level you are. So you want to spend those cards wisely and get experience to level up so you can do even more options as you explore deeper into the Andromeda. So the 3 main phases are the crew phase, and then you've got the threat phase, and then you've got the recovery phase. Now the crew phase, as you would expect, this is where you're going to be playing your cards and performing actions. There's a whole group of icons that you can tap into that define exactly what you're doing. Things like moving, you can do strikes or hitting, you can do when you're communicating with others, trying to persuade them, things like that. But the thing here that's neat about these cards, as you play out the cards, you're going to be playing them out above your player board, almost in this like tableau / comic book style. And depending on how you play the cards, a lot of the cards have multiple options for you to perform, and how you play those cards out will determine what kind of experience you get at the end of the round and so forth. But this is where you're moving, you're exploring, you're basically searching the ship for that silicon. And when you find tokens like the question mark, you'll be searching and things like that. But you can also interact with the other players by trading items. And this is also where you're going to be fabricating. If you find a fabricator, you can create gear from tokens and different resources you found along the way. Along with performing actions, each of your characters have their own special ability as well. So you can tap into that here. You can also just pass if you so choose. But again, the different type of actions will depend on what type of cards you have in your hand and how you're dealing with threats versus survivors and things of that nature. Survivors are interesting because as you pull a survivor, as you search and find them and so forth, well, survivors you can try to persuade with dialogue on one side of the card, and on the other side, potentially you can threaten them, trying to get them to come into line and settle down. So there's lots of different ways to interact with these survivors, which is super intriguing. And when you're dealing with threats, you can engage with them, and this is what's fun about pulling tokens, or cubes from the bag, I should say, is that you're trying to pull the right type of cube in order to strike at them using, again, the type of card that you engage with them. And you have cards in hand that show how you're dealing with survivors or how you're dealing with those threats. You can also team up on these threats and survivors. So lots of interesting ways to approach different things that are happening within the ship. So in the threat phase of the game, this is very dependent on the big boss or baddie that is in play. And you do have a threat level across the top of each of these. You'll be incrementing this up. Now, there's different things that happen based on that threat level. And you'll follow the instructions on the card. You may be directly engaging with someone like the siren, or you have to figure out the siren's riddle. Lots of different things that can happen with the different types of bosses that you encounter. And so just like with the crew phase, you'll be using your cards, playing them out in front of you to engage with the threat that is currently attacking all of you, because the big boss is particularly bad. But you will use these cards in the next phase, which is the recovery phase. You will be calculating all your different experience to level up your character, as well as dive in and get some new skills, adding them to your discard pile and so forth. Now, some of the skills have limited availability, so you will have to keep an eye on which cards are available and when. But you can flip over the cards showing which ones are available and which ones aren't, but you'll have to spend the required amount of experience in order to gain those cards and level up your character, so to say, giving them more and more abilities. So you'll continue this way, round after round, until you have accumulated enough of the silicon and got back to the hangar and escaped. Now, if you reach the end of the threat level track, then you've run out of time and you lose. So there's definitely a race that's happening. There's some time pressure here for sure. And one of the interesting things as well in the game is that some of your gear that you use during the game can break down or be destroyed potentially, but you can repair it if you go to a fabricator and use the required elements to bring it back into specs and make it available to use again. But you have a die roll that will help calculate that if your gear survived an encounter and so forth. It's another neat aspect to the game for sure. But again, collecting that silicon is your main goal. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, I really like the theme of this game. I love that you're exploring this derelict space station and trying to find the different resources and goods. And then to run into survivors, it has this own story that it develops as you move through the game. Really intriguing. And not only that, but you get to develop your character along the way. Some really interesting choices to be made. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something that'd be of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it for me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.